What happens when a single mom, desperate for a ride, asks a stranger for help, only to find out he's hiding a deadly secret? Jasmine never expected her simple request for a ride to turn into a life-or-death game of survival. But when a mysterious millionaire CEO enters her life, everything she thought she knew is thrown into chaos. Who is this man? Why does he seem to know things about her brother that could destroy them both? And what happens when the truth behind his shocking connection to their family finally comes to light? Buckle up, this story will keep you on the edge of your seat as secrets unravel, alliances break, and one wrong move could cost everything. Don't blink. The shocking truth is just around the corner, and you'll never see it coming. Watch till the end, because in this game, no one walks away unscathed. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next twist. It was a cold, overcast evening in the quiet suburbs of New Jersey. Jasmine, a single mom, stood by the side of the road, her hand clutching her purse tightly. She had been waiting for what felt like hours. Her shift had ended late, and her car had broken down just a mile from home. She had no choice but to ask for help. The streets were nearly empty, and the few passing cars did nothing to slow down. Her son, Caleb, was at home, alone. She couldn't bear to think about what might happen if she didn't get home soon. The anxiety gnawed at her, and she shifted on her feet, trying to keep warm. Suddenly, a sleek black car slowed down in front of her. The window rolled down, and a man's voice called out. "Need a ride?" Jasmine hesitated, the chill of the night sinking into her bones. She had always been cautious about strangers, especially in the city. But something about this moment felt different. Desperation pushed her forward. "Yes, please," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The man smiled, his features calm and welcoming. He was dressed sharply, in a tailored suit that screamed wealth. Jasmine noted the lack of a wedding ring and the confidence in his posture. He motioned to the passenger seat. "Hop in. I'm heading in the same direction." She thanked him quietly, then quickly got into the car. As the door closed behind her, the warmth of the car seemed to push the cold away. The man glanced at her. "What happened? Car trouble?" Jasmine nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed. "It's just a hassle." Not the first time. The car began moving, and they eased into the quiet streets. She glanced at the man, trying to read him. There was something about his demeanor, cool, calm, almost too perfect. "So, what do you do?" she asked, trying to make small talk. He smiled again, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Business," he replied simply. "I run a few companies." "Wow," Jasmine said, raising an eyebrow. "That sounds impressive." "It has its moments," he said, turning his attention back to the road. The conversation faded into a comfortable silence. But Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than he was letting on. Minutes passed, and she began to relax, the tension in her shoulders slowly unwinding. Then, as they crossed an unfamiliar intersection, he made a sudden left turn. Jasmine's stomach tightened. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I thought I'd take a small detour," he said finally, his tone smooth, almost too smooth. Jasmine's instincts flared. Something about the situation didn't sit right with her. Her heart began to race, and her eyes flicked nervously to the window. The streetlights outside flickered, casting shadows that seemed to stretch longer than usual. She reached for her phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but she couldn't find it in her bag. "Don't worry," the man said, sensing her growing unease. "You're safe." But Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling of dread that was building in her chest. The further they drove, the more isolated the streets became. The world outside the car seemed to slip away, swallowed by the darkness. Finally, the man pulled into a secluded parking lot behind a large building. Jasmine's heart raced faster. "Why are we stopping here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man turned to her, his expression now serious. "This is where I work," he said. "I wanted to show you something." The car came to a stop, and for a moment, Jasmine was frozen in place. The silence in the car was suffocating. Then, before she could react, the man opened the door and stepped out. "Come on, let me show you," he said, his tone insistent. Jasmine hesitated. She was so close to home, so close to safety. But she was already here, and there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she followed him out of the car. As they walked toward the building, Jasmine's mind raced. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew she needed to stay alert. The man led her through a set of heavy glass doors into a high-end lobby. It was luxurious, but there was something cold about the space. "No one's here?" she asked, her voice shaky. He smiled, but there was an edge to it now. "They're all gone for the day," he said. Jasmine felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wanted to leave, to run. But something kept her rooted in place. Then the man stopped in front of an elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. "Come on, you'll see soon enough." The doors slid open with a soft chime. Jasmine stepped in, but her senses screamed at her to turn around. As the elevator ascended, the tension between them thickened. Finally, the doors opened, and Jasmine was greeted by a panoramic view of the city skyline. She didn't have time to appreciate the view, though. Because the man's next words left her frozen in place. "Welcome to my office," he said, his voice now full of pride. Jasmine turned, her eyes wide with disbelief. The room around her was opulent, filled with expensive furniture and artwork. But it wasn't the decor that had her heart racing. It was the sheer magnitude of what he had just said. This wasn't just any office. It was a CEO's private space. And this man was the CEO. Jasmine stared at him, her mouth dry. "I didn't expect this," she managed to say. The man chuckled softly. "I don't think you expected any of this, Jasmine." Her name. He knew her name. Jasmine's mind spun, trying to piece everything together. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Let's just say I'm someone who can help you, in ways you can't even imagine." Her heart skipped a beat. And that was when everything shifted. Jasmine's pulse quickened, the words hanging heavy in the air. The way he said it, calm, almost too calm, set every alarm bell off in her mind. "Help me," she repeated, her voice trembling. He smiled, but this time, there was a darker edge to it. "Yes," he said simply. "You don't know it yet, but I've been watching you." Jasmine's heart slammed against her ribs. "Watching me?" she echoed, a cold chill spreading across her skin. He nodded slowly. "For some time now. You've caught my attention, Jasmine. You're resourceful. Determined. A fighter." She backed away slightly, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just a casual meeting anymore. This was something far more sinister. "Why would you be watching me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He took a step closer, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her stomach churn. "You're struggling. You're at the edge, but you're too proud to ask for help. I admire that." Jasmine shook her head. "No. I don't need your help. I want to go home. Right now." The man raised an eyebrow. "You think you can go home?" he asked, his tone soft, almost mocking. "After everything you've just walked into?" Her mind raced. This was no coincidence. He had planned this. He had lured her here for some reason, and now she felt trapped. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. "What do you want from me?" she asked, barely able to keep her voice steady. He smiled again, but this time, it was the smile of a predator closing in on its prey. "Everything," he said simply. "You see, Jasmine, I'm not just any CEO. I'm the CEO of a company that deals in very lucrative opportunities. Opportunities for people like you. People who are desperate. People who are willing to do anything to change their lives." Jasmine felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She realized she had stepped into something far darker than she ever could have imagined. He took another step forward, his presence looming over her. "You have two choices, Jasmine," he said. "You can walk out of here, go back to your normal life, and continue struggling. Or you can take my offer. A real opportunity. One that will change everything for you and Caleb." Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but something held her in place. His words were like a spell, pulling her in deeper. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to his desk, pulling out a sleek, black folder. He opened it, revealing documents and pictures. "Because I know what you need," he said, pushing the folder toward her. "I've studied you. I've seen your struggles, your strength, your fear. And I can give you everything you've ever wanted." Jasmine's eyes flicked to the folder, but she didn't move. Her mind raced. What was in that folder? What kind of person was this man? "Why don't you look at it?" he said, his voice smooth, coaxing. Her hands trembled as she reached for the folder, her fingers brushing against the cold leather. With a deep breath, she flipped it open. Inside were photos of her, Caleb, her apartment, even her workplace. Her stomach lurched as she realized he had been following her. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice now full of panic. "What do you want from us?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I want you to make a choice," he said, his voice low, almost hypnotic. "Choose, Jasmine. Choose carefully." The walls of the room seemed to close in on her. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the pressure building with every passing second. She could feel the trap closing around her. But what could she do? He was powerful. He had resources she couldn't even comprehend. And she was alone. Her mind spun in circles, trying to find an escape, but every thought led to the same conclusion. There was no way out. Not without making a choice. She stared at the folder, at the photos, at the opportunity he was offering. What did she have to lose? Her heart pounded in her chest as she weighed her options. The man was waiting for her decision, his eyes locked on hers. She could feel the pressure building, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Then, with a shaky breath, Jasmine made her choice. "I'll take the offer," she said, her voice barely audible. The man smiled, his eyes gleaming with something dark. "Good," he said. "You won't regret it, Jasmine. You just need to remember one thing: once you enter this world, there's no going back." Jasmine's stomach churned as she realized the full weight of what she had just agreed to. But it was too late to turn back now. She had made her choice. And there was no escaping the path she had just walked down. The man's smile deepened as he handed her a contract from the folder, his fingers brushing hers ever so slightly. "Sign this," he said. "It's just a formality, but it secures your future." Jasmine looked at the document. The words blurred before her eyes, and her breath caught in her throat. It was an agreement, a binding contract. Her name, Caleb's name, her life, it all seemed to be laid out in those cold, calculated words. "I need you to trust me, Jasmine," he said, his voice smooth, coaxing. "Trust that this is the only way to give you and your son a life you deserve." Her mind spun as she stared at the contract. Her gut told her to run, to tear it up, to get out of there. But her circumstances, her desperation, they pushed her to keep going. For Caleb, she had to make the choice. Slowly, her hand reached for the pen he handed her. But just as she was about to sign, a sharp knock echoed through the door. Jasmine's heart skipped. The man turned, his expression darkening slightly. "Who's there?" he called. The door opened a fraction, and a woman stepped inside. She was tall, striking, and dressed in a power suit that matched the opulence of the room. Her eyes met Jasmine's, and there was an odd, knowing look in them. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir," the woman said, her voice cool and professional. "But there's someone at the door asking for Miss Jasmine." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. Someone knew she was here. Her mind raced. Could it be someone from her past? The man frowned, clearly irritated, but then turned to Jasmine with a resigned sigh. "Don't worry, Jasmine. It's just a minor distraction. We'll finish this in a moment." But the woman's words kept ringing in her mind. Someone knew she was here. Could they be trying to help her? Or had someone already realized what kind of trap she was in? The man turned back to the woman, speaking in a low tone Jasmine couldn't hear. A cold wave of dread washed over her. Should she wait for the woman to come back? Should she take the opportunity to run? As the conversation between the two became more hushed, Jasmine's eyes flicked around the room. The window, dark, empty, almost oppressive, seemed to close in around her. And then, as if the decision had been made for her, the woman stepped back into the room. "Miss Jasmine," she said, her voice colder now. "There's no one at the door." It was a misunderstanding. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest. Was it a lie? Or was it a test to see if she would crack under pressure? The man didn't seem to notice the tension, his gaze returning to Jasmine with that same unsettling calm. "Go ahead," he urged again, his voice no longer sounding as friendly. "Sign the contract, and let's start your new life." Jasmine's hand hovered over the pen. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to break free of this place, of this man's reach. But she knew that if she ran, there would be consequences. Her future would slip even further out of her control. And if she signed, there was no telling what he would make her do. But then, something shifted in her mind, a flicker of a thought. If there was someone else here, someone who had come looking for her, maybe she still had a way out. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'll sign," she said, her voice low but steady. But just as she reached for the pen, there was another knock at the door. This time, more urgent, almost frantic. The man's face twisted in frustration. "Who is it now?" he muttered, standing abruptly. Jasmine's heart raced. Could it be someone trying to stop this? Someone who was on her side? But as the door opened, she didn't expect what happened next. A man in a security uniform stepped inside, holding a phone in his hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his eyes darting nervously between the man and Jasmine. "But there's someone on the line who insists it's urgent." The man's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" he demanded. The security guard glanced at Jasmine, then back at him. "It's a phone call for her. They say it's about her son." Jasmine's stomach dropped. Her son. Caleb. Could it be him? Or was it someone from her past? "Give me the phone," she said, her voice sharp with panic. The guard hesitated, then handed her the phone. Jasmine's hands shook as she pressed it to her ear. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was familiar, low, frantic, filled with urgency. "Jasmine. It's Ryan. I don't know how, but I found out where you are. You need to leave. Now." Jasmine's heart pounded in her ears. Ryan. Her brother. She had almost forgotten about him, thinking he had disappeared from her life. "Ryan," she breathed. "How did you?" "Don't ask questions. Just leave. It's not safe. Trust me. Get out of there, now." Her eyes darted to the man, who was watching her closely, a frown deepening on his face. The sudden realization hit her: this man had known about her son all along. He had been watching, planning, manipulating. Her blood ran cold. And that was when she understood: she wasn't just a pawn in his game. She was his leverage. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice cracking with fear. "I'm on my way." The phone went dead. And in that moment, everything changed. The man's eyes darkened, his lips curling into a tight, predatory smile. "You think you can escape," he whispered. "You just signed your life away." Jasmine's heart raced. She had no choice now. She had to make a run for it. The game had just begun. Jasmine's breath came in short, panicked bursts. Her eyes locked onto the man in front of her, his sinister smile growing wider, his eyes dark with malice. "You should have signed the contract," he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Now, there are consequences." Her mind raced. She needed to get out. She needed to protect Caleb. Everything else, her pride, her fear, had to be thrown aside. The man stepped toward her, his movements smooth and controlled, like a predator closing in on its prey. Jasmine glanced around the room, her instincts screaming for her to find an exit. But there was nowhere to run. The only door was behind the man, and the elevator was too far away. She reached for the folder in her hand, clutching it tightly as though it were a lifeline. A plan formed in her mind, risky, dangerous, but her only chance. Without warning, she hurled the folder at him, aiming for his face. The man staggered back, momentarily disoriented. In that brief moment of confusion, Jasmine bolted toward the door. Her heart pounded in her chest as she threw open the heavy glass doors, sprinting into the hallway. Behind her, she heard the sound of footsteps following, growing louder, closer. She didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. With every ounce of strength, she ran down the corridor, her mind a blur of frantic thoughts. She had to get out. Had to get to Caleb. She turned a corner, nearly slipping on the marble floor, but kept running, not daring to slow down. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she couldn't stop to check it. The footsteps behind her quickened, and she could feel the man's presence closing in. She reached the elevator and frantically pressed the button, her fingers trembling. The doors slid open, but before she could step inside, a strong hand grabbed her arm. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned to face him. The man's grip tightened around her wrist, his expression cold, his eyes filled with fury. "You think you can just run?" he hissed. "You belong to me now. You can't escape." Terror surged through her. She pulled against his grip, but he was too strong, too determined. "Let go of me," she shouted, panic rising in her throat. "Not until you realize the truth," he growled, pulling her back toward the office. "You're not just some random woman I picked up off the street. You're part of something bigger. And whether you like it or not, you're in this now." Her pulse hammered in her ears, and everything inside her screamed to fight. But before she could do anything, she heard another voice, familiar, urgent. "Jasmine." She froze. Ryan. Her brother. She turned to see him running toward her, a look of desperation on his face. "Ryan," she cried, her voice breaking. He reached them just as the man's grip on her arm loosened slightly, distracted by his sudden arrival. Jasmine didn't waste a second. She twisted out of the man's hold and darted toward Ryan, grabbing his arm. "We have to go, now," she yelled, pulling him toward the elevator. Ryan nodded, his face pale but determined. They rushed inside just as the man recovered, lunging forward. "No," he shouted, his voice full of rage. "You can't just walk away from this." The elevator doors slammed shut just in time, trapping him outside. For a moment, there was silence. Jasmine's chest heaved as she leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Ryan looked at her, his expression tense. "Jasmine, what's going on? Who is that guy?" She shook her head, too shaken to speak. "I don't know. But he's not who he says he is." Ryan's eyes darkened. "We need to get out of here, now. He's dangerous." The elevator dinged, and the doors opened to the street. They ran out into the cold night air, their footsteps echoing in the empty parking lot. Jasmine's mind was spinning, trying to process everything. She didn't know who that man really was, but she knew one thing for sure: her life would never be the same. Ryan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward his car. "We can't just leave it like this," she said, glancing back at the building. "We have to find out more. I need to know what he wants, why he's targeting me. If he's watching my every move, we have to be careful." Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with concern. "I know, Jasmine. But we need to get you somewhere safe first." As they sped off into the night, Jasmine's thoughts raced. She had just escaped a nightmare. But the nightmare wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. And whoever that man was, Jasmine knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted. And now, neither could she. The car sped through the quiet streets, the headlights cutting through the darkness as Jasmine's thoughts spun in a dizzying whirl. She couldn't shake the image of the man, the CEO who had played her like a pawn, his cold smile, his unblinking eyes. Ryan's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white as he glanced at her, his expression filled with concern. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, but urgent. Jasmine nodded, though she felt anything but okay. Just trying to wrap my mind around everything," she murmured, her voice shaky. "I can't believe I almost signed that contract. I don't know who that guy is, Ryan. But he's dangerous." "I know," Ryan said, his eyes flicking to her for a brief moment before returning to the road. "I've been trying to track down a lead for weeks now, but every time I got close, things would get complicated. I didn't know he had his eyes on you." Jasmine's heart pounded. "What do you mean, track down a lead? You knew something?" Ryan's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer right away. The air between them thickened with unspoken words, heavy with the tension of the past few hours. "I didn't know the full extent of it," Ryan finally said, his voice strained. "But I suspected something. That man, the one who came after you, he's not just some CEO. His company's tied to a lot of dark stuff, illegal dealings, money laundering, you name it." Jasmine's blood ran cold. "Are you saying that man, he's a criminal?" "Worse," Ryan muttered. "He's the kind of person who can make your life disappear without a trace if you cross him. But, you're not the only one he's been watching, Jasmine. There's more to this than just you." Jasmine's thoughts stalled. "What do you mean, more?" Ryan took a deep breath. "Some of the people he's been connected to, they've disappeared. Vanished. And no one's been able to figure out how." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. Her grip tightened around her phone in her pocket. She had to know. She had to figure out what this man wanted with her. Why her? "Why me, Ryan?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. "Why is he fixated on me? What does he want from me?" Ryan glanced at her, his expression grave. "I'm not sure. But we'll find out. We can't stop until we do." Jasmine nodded, the weight of the uncertainty pressing down on her chest. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, seeing an unknown number flash across the screen. Her heart stopped. "Don't answer it," Ryan warned, his eyes narrowing as he glanced at her. It's probably him trying to track us. But something in Jasmine's gut told her she needed to pick up. With a trembling hand, she answered the call. Hello? A low chuckle echoed through the speaker, sending a chill down her spine. Jasmine, the man's voice came through, smooth and mocking. You didn't think I'd let you go that easily, did you? Her blood ran cold. You're the one who's been following me. Not just following, he said, the amusement clear in his voice. I've been preparing, planning. You see, Jasmine, everything about you has been carefully calculated. From the moment you got into that car, you became part of something bigger than you can even imagine. Jasmine's hand tightened around the phone. What do you want from me? The man's voice lowered, cold and measured. I want you to understand the power you're dealing with. You've made an enemy of the wrong person. And now, you're going to pay the price. Her throat tightened. What does that mean? You'll find out soon enough. He laughed again, the sound chilling her to the core. But I'll give you a little hint. Your brother has no idea what he's gotten himself into either. If you think he's going to protect you, think again. Before she could respond, the line went dead. Jasmine's hands shook violently. She stared at the phone, her mind racing. What is it? Ryan asked, his voice tight. Ryan, he knows about you. Her voice trembled. He's been watching you too. Ryan cursed under his breath, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. They're playing a dangerous game, Jasmine, he said, his voice grim. This man is untouchable. But that doesn't mean we can't fight back. We'll find a way to bring him down. The car turned onto a dark, quiet street. Ryan parked in front of a small, inconspicuous house. This is the safe house, Ryan said, looking over at her. We'll lay low here for now. Keep your head down until we figure out what we're dealing with. Jasmine nodded, feeling a strange sense of both relief and dread. She stepped out of the car, her heart heavy with the weight of what had just happened. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and she felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She had stepped into a world she couldn't understand, a game where the stakes were higher than anything she'd ever imagined. And she had no idea how far it would go, or what would be left when it was over. The door clicked shut behind them, the quiet of the safe house wrapping around them like a cold, suffocating blanket. Jasmine took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady herself. Ryan unlocked a door at the end of a narrow hallway, leading them into a small, dimly lit room. Stay here, he said quietly. I'll make sure everything's secure. We can't risk being followed. Jasmine nodded, sinking into a worn armchair by the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the room. Her phone lay heavy in her pocket, its buzzing feeling like a constant reminder that everything was spiraling out of control. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Another unknown number. Her heart skipped, but she answered it quickly before she could second-guess herself. Jasmine, the man's voice came through immediately, smooth and chilling. I'm impressed. I didn't expect you to run so fast. She stiffened, gripping the phone tightly. What do you want from me? His laugh was low, almost bored. I've already told you. You're part of a much bigger picture now. You don't get to walk away from this. Jasmine's mind raced. I don't understand. What is this picture you're talking about? You'll understand soon enough, he replied cryptically. But I'll tell you something you might find interesting, your brother, Ryan. He's not as clean as you think. He's been digging into things that are far too dangerous for him to handle. Jasmine felt a cold sweat form on the back of her neck. Leave Ryan out of this, she said, her voice shaking. The man chuckled again. I'm afraid that's not up to you, Jasmine. He's already too deep. And now, so are you. The line went dead. Jasmine stared at her phone, her heart hammering in her chest. Her brother, Ryan, was tangled up in something dark, something dangerous. And now, so was she. She didn't know what the man meant, but she had a sickening feeling that whatever was coming next was going to hit them both hard. Suddenly, she heard a knock at the door. Her body stiffened, fear creeping through her veins. It was too soon for Ryan to be back. She stood, moving quietly toward the door. "Ryan?" she called softly. There was no answer, just the faint sound of breathing on the other side. Jasmine's pulse quickened. Her mind screamed for her to run, to hide. But she couldn't. Not without Ryan. She hesitated, then grabbed the lamp on the table beside her, holding it like a weapon. With her free hand, she slowly turned the handle and cracked the door open. A figure stood in the shadows, their face obscured by a dark hood. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaky but firm. The figure stepped forward slightly, lifting their hood to reveal a familiar face. Ryan. But something was wrong. His eyes were wide with panic, his face pale and strained. "Jasmine," he said urgently, his voice tight. "We need to go. Now." Her heart dropped. "Ryan, what's going on? What happened?" "Just trust me," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "They found us. They're close. We need to move before they get here." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. The man on the phone had warned her. The net was closing in on them. Without another word, she followed Ryan as he pulled her down the hallway, his hand gripping hers tightly. The urgency in his movements made her stomach tighten. As they reached the back door, Ryan glanced out the window. His eyes went wide. "They're here." Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest as she looked around. The darkness outside seemed to stretch on forever, the night air thick with tension. Ryan grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward the alley behind the house. They ran, her breath coming in sharp gasps as her feet hit the pavement. Behind them, she could hear the sound of car engines revving, the low hum of distant sirens mixing with the soft, rhythmic sound of their footsteps. "Where are we going?" Jasmine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan didn't answer, just kept running. She could feel the weight of everything closing in on them, the man's words echoing in her mind, the feeling of being hunted. They turned another corner, and Ryan suddenly stopped. He looked around, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow, his breathing erratic. "This way," he muttered, pulling her down another narrow alley. Jasmine's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Why was the man after them? What had they gotten themselves into? She didn't know how much more of this she could take. Her heart was pounding, her breath shallow, and the fear of what might come next was suffocating. But just as they rounded another corner, they heard footsteps behind them. Quick, deliberate. And then a voice, cold, calm. "Going somewhere?" Jasmine froze. She didn't need to look to know who it was. The man was there. And this time, he wasn't playing games. Jasmine's breath hitched as she turned slowly, the hair on the back of her neck standing on end. There, standing in the shadows just a few feet away, was the man, his cold, calculating gaze fixed on them. He stepped forward, his movements smooth, controlled, like a predator closing in on its prey. Ryan instinctively stepped in front of Jasmine, his body tensing as if he were preparing for a fight. "Not so fast," the man said, his voice laced with a quiet menace. "You really think you can outrun me?" Ryan's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. Jasmine's mind raced, desperate for a way out, some way to escape this nightmare. But there was no clear path. No easy answers. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaky but fierce. "What do you want from us?" The man's lips curled into a slow, mocking smile. "I've already told you," he said, taking another step closer. You're part of something bigger than you realize. And now, well, now it's time to play your part. Jasmine could feel her heart thudding in her chest, the weight of his words sinking deep into her bones. Ryan moved slightly, as if calculating the distance between them and the man. We don't have anything you want. So just leave us alone. The man chuckled darkly, the sound like a low rumble in the air. You really don't understand, do you? It's not about what you have, he said, his voice turning colder. It's about what you owe. Ryan's eyes narrowed. What the hell are you talking about? The man's smile grew even more sinister. You'll find out soon enough. You've already been marked. All of you have. Jasmine's blood ran cold at his words. Marked, she echoed, barely able to whisper the word. The man nodded slowly. You can't escape what's coming. You'll play your part, or you'll pay the price. Ryan stepped forward, his fists clenched. I won't let you hurt her. I won't let you hurt anyone. The man raised a hand, his eyes gleaming with something cold and unforgiving. I'm not here to hurt anyone, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I'm here to make sure you understand. You don't get to walk away. Not from me. Not from this. Jasmine could feel the air around them thickening with danger, the tension palpable as if everything were about to explode. She needed to think fast. She glanced at Ryan, then back at the man. Her mind scrambled, trying to find some escape, some leverage. You think we're just going to do whatever you want, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. We're not your puppets. The man's smile faltered for a moment, his eyes flashing with something dark. No, you're not my puppets, he said slowly. But you will be. Whether you like it or not. Before she could respond, Ryan lunged forward, grabbing her hand and pulling her away from the man. Run, he shouted. They both sprinted down the alley, adrenaline pumping through their veins, but the sound of heavy footsteps quickly followed them. Ryan yanked open a nearby gate, pulling Jasmine through. They found themselves in an overgrown garden, the bushes and trees hiding them from view, but it wouldn't be long before the man found them again. Jasmine's mind raced. How could they keep running? How could they survive this? We can't keep running forever, she gasped, her breath coming in sharp, frantic bursts. Ryan didn't answer, but his grip on her hand tightened, his jaw set in determination. We need to find out what he's talking about, Ryan muttered. What he means by, oh. There's something here we're missing, and if we don't figure it out, it's all going to fall apart. Jasmine nodded, her thoughts still spinning. I can't think straight with him on our tail, she said. But before Ryan could respond, they heard the sound of footsteps, closer this time. Much closer. A voice called out from the entrance to the garden, smooth and unsettling. Did you really think you could hide from me forever? The man's silhouette appeared in the distance, his figure framed by the dim streetlights, his eyes gleaming like two dark orbs. Ryan turned to Jasmine, his expression filled with urgency. We don't have much time. We have to figure this out. Jasmine felt her heart race as she glanced around, looking for any way to escape. But the garden was walled in, and the only way out was back toward the man. They had no choice but to confront him. Ryan's voice dropped to a whisper. Whatever happens, stick close to me. Jasmine nodded, fear coursing through her veins as the man slowly closed in on them. He was ready to play his game, and they had no idea what the rules were. But whatever was coming, Jasmine knew they couldn't run anymore. They had to fight. And the stakes were higher than either of them could have ever imagined. The man took another step closer, the shadow swallowing his figure as he spoke, his voice cold and calculating. You're out of time, he said, his smile never wavering. The game has already begun, and you're just now starting to understand the rules. Ryan's hand tightened around Jasmine's, pulling her a step back, though there was nowhere left to retreat. The walled garden was their prison now. Jasmine's mind raced, every option feeling like a dead end. She couldn't let this be the end, they couldn't let this be the end. Ryan, she whispered, her voice trembling but firm, we need to know what this man wants. We need to understand what he means by, oh. Ryan nodded, his eyes narrowing in determination. We're not playing his game anymore. The man's grin widened as he slowly circled them. Oh, but you already are. You just don't know it yet. Jasmine took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding, but something clicked inside her, a sudden clarity. She looked directly at the man, her voice steady despite the fear still gnawing at her insides. What do you want? Tell us. We'll give you whatever you want, just stop playing these games. The man paused, his expression shifting for a moment. His cold exterior faltered, but only briefly. You think I'm after money, power, or some other shallow prize? No, Jasmine. I'm after something much more valuable than that. Ryan took a protective step forward, his muscles tensing. What are you talking about? What do you want from us? The man's eyes glinted in the darkness, his lips curling into a knowing smile. I want you, Ryan. Jasmine's stomach churned. The weight of his words hung in the air like a thick fog. What do you mean, me? Ryan demanded, his voice dangerously low. The man's eyes gleamed with cold amusement. You're the one who's been digging, haven't you? The one who's been stirring the pot, trying to bring things to light. But you don't know what you're dealing with. I'm not the monster, Ryan. You are. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. No, you're lying. Ryan's not a part of this. The man's gaze locked onto hers, his expression unreadable. You've been so naive. Ryan is part of this world. Always has been. The debts you've been running from, Ryan, they were never meant to stay buried. Ryan shook his head, his fists clenching in frustration. What do you want me to do? Just give in. Walk away from everything I've ever believed in. The man stepped closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. No. I want you to understand. You'll never walk away, Ryan. There's no way out of this. You're too deep. Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. But the cold certainty in the man's voice made her doubt everything she thought she knew. For a long moment, there was only the sound of their breathing, the air thick with the tension that had built between them. Then, as if on cue, the distant sound of sirens began to wail. Jasmine's eyes widened. We need to leave. Now. The man looked over his shoulder, his gaze flicking to the sound of approaching law enforcement. For the first time, his expression faltered, just slightly. This isn't over, he warned them, his voice laced with venom. You can run, but you can't hide. Not from me. Not from what's coming. Ryan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Jasmine's hand again and turned, pulling her toward the back gate. The sirens grew louder, but they had only one chance to escape. They burst through the gate and into the street, the cold night air rushing past them as they sprinted into the darkness. Jasmine's mind raced, her heart still pounding in her chest. She didn't know what had just happened. The truth, the lies, the game that had been played, it was all too much to process in one moment. Ryan pulled her to a stop just around the corner, his face pale but resolute. We have to get out of here, Jasmine. We can't let him find us again. Jasmine nodded, her throat tight. But, what now? What do we do? Where do we go? Ryan looked at her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, a deep understanding, a realization that they had no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. We fight back, he said quietly. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through and everything still to come. They were in this together now. And no matter how dark the road ahead might be, she wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The sirens grew closer, but for once, Jasmine felt a small spark of hope. They might not have answers yet. They might not have control over what happened next. But they were still standing. And that was something.